Was used to being alone. After moving to a small town, he enjoyed the silence and measured life. Working remotely gave him the opportunity to focus on himself, and evening walks along the old houses of the city became something of a ritual for him. But one day this ritual was broken. One evening he found a letter in his mailbox. The envelope was old, yellowed, with worn corners. The sender's address was barely legible, but what surprised him most was the signature. The letter was signed with the name Edward Grayson. The name was familiar, but Mark could not immediately understand where he knew it from. Returning home, he carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside looked even older than the envelope itself, and the text was written in an elegant handwriting that was difficult to decipher. Dear Mark, we haven't seen each other for a long time, but I know that you remember me. Please come. I'm waiting for you. You know the address. Mark read the letter several times. It was absurd. He had never known anyone named Edward Grayson. Moreover, the sender's address was listed as 13 Dark Alley, a place he had never heard of. At first, he thought it was just someone's weird joke. Perhaps the locals were playing a prank on a new resident. But the next day, a second letter arrived. This time, it was signed by the name Margaret Welsh. He remembered the name. A few months ago, he had read about her in an article about the dead residents of the town. Margaret Welsh had been murdered more than 50 years ago, her body found on the edge of the forest. The text of the letter was short, but disturbing. Mark, time is running out. You must come. The night is near. From that moment on, the letters began to arrive every day. All of them were signed by the names of people he had never met, but whose names were beginning to sound familiar. He checked the city archives and found that all of these people had died decades ago. Some of them had been found in the house where he now lived. Each letter Mark found in his mailbox became stranger and stranger. At first, they were simple sentences, half cryptic, half disturbing, but soon they began to contain details about his life that no one could possibly know. Mark, remember to turn off the light in the bedroom tonight. You don't want to attract unnecessary attention. He read this letter while sitting in the kitchen late at night. Interestingly, he had indeed forgotten to turn off the light the night before. It was a small thing, but it had alarmed him. The next day, the letter came with a warning. Don't open the window when you hear a knock. It's not the wind. That evening, as soon as he sat down to read, the window in his living room did indeed knock softly. His heart began to beat faster. He hadn't opened the window, but from the inside he could see the curtains swaying slightly, although there was no wind or movement outside. Things were getting darker and darker. One of the letters said, Mark, you must go outside at midnight. There will be a box at the gate of the house. Take it and do not open it under any circumstances until dawn. He tried to resist. It sounded ridiculous, absurd, even dangerous, but a strange feeling that someone or something was watching him made him obey. At midnight, Mark threw on his coat and left the house. Fog enveloped the street, and it was unnaturally quiet, as if the city had fallen asleep forever. There really was a box at the gate. It was wooden, small, covered with a thin layer of dust. His fingers trembled when he picked it up. Returning home, he felt the box pulsating in his hands, as if there was something alive inside. He waited until dawn, as the letter said, and only then opened it. Inside was an old key. The next day, the letter explained, This key will open the door to the basement. You must go down. There was no basement in his house, or at least he thought so, but as he examined the walls in the hallway, he noticed a strange gap behind the closet. Rolling the furniture aside, he found a narrow door hidden under layers of wallpaper. The key fit perfectly. When the door opened, a cold blew from inside, and the steps led down into the dark depths. With each step, Mark felt the reality around him change. The air became thick, a dead silence hung around, and faint whispers came from afar. He heard his name, spoken by dozens of voices at once. The basement turned out to be strange. The walls were covered with inscriptions in an unknown language, and in the center there was a table with a black book. On its cover, were carved the same names as in the letters he had received. Mark read the first sentence of the book. From that moment on, he knew he had made a mistake. As Mark spoke the first words from the book, the air around him grew cold, and the light from the single lamp on the ceiling began to flicker. The pages of the book, although they contained nothing but strange symbols, suddenly began to glow, and from somewhere in the depths of the basement came a low, drawn-out hum. The whispers he had heard earlier grew louder, turning into an endless chorus of voices. They filled the room, calling him, repeating his name. Mark felt his body go motionless, as if roots had grown into the floor. The book lying on the table turned its pages by itself. As if it were alive, each spread revealed a new name, written in large blood-red letters, and the last of them was his own, Mark Evans. At that moment he heard a new sound, a muffled grinding. He turned around and saw how the door through which he had entered was slowly closing. "Now!" He tried to scream, but his voice caught in his throat. The book opened to the last page, and words began to appear on it, as if an invisible hand was writing them right before his eyes. He realized it was a new letter. His gaze was drawn to the lines. "You are one of us. It is your turn to call those who will come for you." The whispers around him became clearer, and he realized that the voices he heard belonged to those whose letters he received. They too had once been people. They too had followed these strange instructions until they ended up here. Mark felt his hand reach for the book on its own. He couldn't resist. His fingers squeezed the old quill lying nearby and began to write. The letter was addressed to someone new, an unfamiliar name, but he saw their face before his eyes, saw where they lived, and how they would find his first letter. Each letter he wrote seemed to suck the life out of him. He felt himself disappearing, becoming a part of this place, merging with the voices that had whispered before. When the last word was written, the book slammed shut, and he realized that his existence now boiled down to one thing: waiting. Waiting for the next person to open the letter sent by his hand. The next day, a new letter appeared in the stranger's mailbox. It began like this: "Dear friend, time is running out. We are waiting for you.